Okay, good to see you again. Um, we've traveled a long road with short stories. Okay, we've done a whole lot of different things with them. We've kind of considered so many of them in so many different ways. Okay, and what a great road you guys have traveled to the point where when we just talked about Parson Hooper in one person's comments, they said that Parson Hooper makes them think about their own sins. Okay, and other people alluded to the same kind of thing. And so what this means is that you have gone from just reading stories as a story, something out there, to in fact what fiction can do, how you can make fiction a part of you, and so how you as a person can grow by, in a sense, experiencing stuff that you read in fiction. You know, so if you think back now through the different stories we've read, and you think about the grandmother in A Good Man Is Hard to Find, you may have a little bit different perspective on her than you did when we actually read the story. And if you go back to the situation where Emily was in, it might be a little easier for you to put yourself into Emily's place. And so that whole situation might become a little bit more realistic for you. And you might even go way back to early in the semester when we talked about Mrs. Mallard, you know, and how her life changed and changed, boom, boom, you know, in a flat, in an instant, okay, you know, so we've traveled a long road, and you guys have done an incredible job. I have so much enjoyed reading and responding to the essays and the comments that you've made. It just shows me that you wanted to get from this what you can, and the realization that stories aren't just stories, but stories are pieces of life, and we can all grow through experiencing the pieces of life that we read about in fiction. Okay, so congratulations to you. You've done a terrific job with it. I'm so proud of all of you because you really have worked hard and done so much. It's just been so much fun for me. And I mentioned last time about trying to get together, and you know, I'm marking down when you guys said you are available. So I'm looking toward sometime after Easter when maybe most of us at least can get together, whether it's during a school day or in an evening or whatever. Somebody said on weekends. Well, I don't know. So many people work on weekends that might be tough, but we'll try to figure something out. So we can get maybe most of us together anyway. Okay. I would like that to happen. So if you didn't let me know what kind of schedule you're normally on, try to do that so that I do know, you know, and I can work to try to plan that. Okay. I mean, I suppose if need be, we could even try to get together on a you know, FaceTime thing, if we can't get together in person. But it is kind of fun to get together in person and actually meet each other. But that way, at least we'd be able to see what each other looks like. I mean, you all know what I look like, but there's only 3 or 4 of you that I know what you look like because I had 3 or 4 of you in class last semester. So anyway, okay. So, and no comments about my hair. I know I needed a haircut badly. Even my barber told me I needed a haircut badly. So I finally got it done. But I kind of play this little game with my wife. I kind of wait until she tells me that I really need a haircut before I go. Should I do that? No, of course not. I shouldn't do that. But it just makes it fun. But anyway, that's why I finally got my haircut. Okay, so, you know, I like to kind of dress for the occasion for you, okay? In some of the videos, obviously, we've done that. We've had some before fires. I've worn some clothes that, you know, were somehow relevant to what we were doing, or put myself in a situation that was somehow relative to what we're doing. And so we're doing that again tonight, okay? We're moving on now from the short story. And don't forget the things we talked about in the short story, because, in fact, later on in the semester, I'll be asking you to touch upon the elements of literature in another exercise we'll be doing, okay? So don't forget about all that stuff because you will be retouching it. Okay, but we're moving on now to the world of poetry. And for some people, that's, oh my God, I hate poetry. And for other people, it's like, okay, poetry's okay. It's something different. Well, I don't want you to hate poetry. I want to present poetry to you in a way that you can not hate it, in a sense, appreciate it, enjoy it, love it, maybe not. I don't know. Um, what's important for you to realize? There's a bunch of things that are important for you to realize in poetry, okay? Um, and one of them is that in most poems, the words are like kernels of popcorn, okay? In poetry, we generally get great ideas condensed into a few words. So the words in poetry are like kernels of popcorn. They explode for us with meaning and so many possible different meanings. And what's important for you is something that we've been saying all through our talking about short stories too. That a poem is going to have meaning for you as an individual. What it meant for the poet when he wrote it might very well be different, even for the poet, if a year later, or a week later, or 5 years later, he read that same poem. So we're not going to be looking for you to really, really connect with the poet. The poet's going to lay out certain thoughts for us, and we may try to get inside the poet's mind, but we also want to try to let the poem get inside us, okay? And so, poetry is another way of revisiting the human experience, okay? And again, you guys have done so well in the way that you've grown in visiting the human experience to the point where, again, last week somebody said Parson Hooper makes me think about my own sins. Holy cow, how much more human can you get? And again, others of you made the same kinds of allusions, So I'm sure that you understand what I mean when I say to grow in the human experience, because poetry does so much of that. Okay, so we're going to talk today about narrative poems. Narrate. Okay, a narrative poem tells a story. Okay? Now, with poetry, when you read poetry, first of all, try to read it kind of out loud to yourself, or maybe even have somebody else read it to you, because poetry should be heard as well as read. So that, if you can, lock yourself in the bathroom and read poetry to yourself, out loud so that you can hear it, or even hear it inside your own head so that, not just buzz through it, but read it so that you can hear it too. That adds a real quality to poetry, and it adds to the understanding of it all, okay? You get the idea, because I make these videos for you. I could put this stuff in lesson, but I know that this adds another quality to it. It's like you get this crazy old guy to laugh at each week, So, okay, so, poems tell a story. They're meant to be heard. Poetry really developed from ancient storytelling back thousands of years ago. There were entertainers that were referred to as minstrels. That was the name applied to them, minstrel, minstrel. And these minstrels traveled from castle to castle to be entertainers, to tell stories to the people at night. You think about life in a castle at night. It's like, okay, there's no television, there's no radio, maybe people can read, but maybe not, and so, it's like, okay, what's going to happen? So, and of course, you've all heard the story of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and those stories of, the 1001 Arabian Nights. Well, that's how poetry developed, because these minstrels would travel from castle to castle and spend a week or 2 weeks or whatever in a castle entertaining the people at night with their different stories. And how did they remember those stories? They put them to meter and rhyme, okay? And if you think about it, the songs that you can remember the words to best, yeah, are songs that rhyme. Okay, well, poetry is a lot the same thing. Now, this is important though. Okay, even though I just said that, when you read poems, don't read them line by line. You're not hearing the music to them, first of all. Okay, don't read them line by line. Read them by the punctuation. They'll make a whole lot more sense. Okay, you can't help but do some of the line by line, and it creates that rhythmic effect, and that's okay. But really try to read them by the punctuation. Okay, so again, we're talking about narrative poems, poems that tell a story. Okay, so I want to share with you one of my favorite poems, and actually, baseball season in the United States officially opened actually yesterday, and the Buffalo Bison's game yesterday was the first professional game in the country, first official league professional game in the country this year. Like all the major leagues haven't started yet, and they were the first minor league team. Some of the other minor leagues opened last night, but the Bisons opened at 1 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So, a little piece of history right here in Buffalo. Okay, so anyway, this is one of my favorite poems, and it's called Casey at the Bat. Okay, and it it tells a story, but it captures so much of the human experience too. Okay, and the poem goes like this. Come on, George, where'd it go? Okay, I know this poem. I've said it a million times. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville Nine that day. The score stood 4-2 with but one inning more to play. And so when Cooney died at first and Burroughs did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A straggling few got up to go, and in deep despair, the rest clung to the hope which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought if only Casey could but get a whack at that, they'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as did also Jimmy Blake, and the former was a pudding, and the latter was a fake. So upon that stricken multitude, grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive the single, to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted, and they saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe on second, and Flynn a hugging third. Then from this joyous magnitude went up a joyous yell. It bounded from the mountain top and rattled in the dell. It struck upon the hillside and recoiled upon the flat. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearings and a smile on Casey's face. And when, responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the wreathing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye. A sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in haughty grandeur there. Close by that sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. That ain't my style, said Casey. Strike one, the umpire said. From the benches black with people, there went up a muffled roar like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. Kill him! Kill the umpire! Shouted someone on the stand. And it's likely they'd have killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visit shone. He stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to that pitcher, and once more the spheroid flew. And Casey still ignored it. The umpire said, strike two! Fraud! Cried the maddened thousands, and the echo answered, fraud! But a scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain, and they knew that Casey would not let that ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's face. His teeth are clenched in hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball. And now he lets it go. And now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there is no joy in Mudville. Mighty Casey has struck out. Okay. So that's Casey at the bat. And I wore this Atlanta Braves shirt and hat today because, of course, Atlanta Braves are the reigning world champion, so thought it was appropriate. And my son and his wife and their 6 kids, and here's 4 of my grandkids right here. You've seen their pictures before, but this one is when the one who's now is 13 was about 4 months old. So, it's a picture that we've had for a while, but it's grandkids. It's just, it's precious. So anyway, okay. So, you can feel so much going on in that poem, right? All of us have been involved somehow in situations where it's competitive, okay? Even if it's a game of Monopoly or a game of poker or pinochle or whatever, you're always competitive. We have this built-in desire to want to win, and naturally Casey wanted to win, and all of his fans wanted him to win. So we can all relate to that. And I'm sure many of you have played sports over the years, okay? And so you know what it is to be in competitive sports. So here we have a crowd reacting to competitive sports, and we can't help but relate to it, We've all been there, okay? Buffalo Bills. I mean, who's not a Buffalo Bills fan, right? And, like, who didn't watch the Bills and the Chiefs in that incredible playoff game? Yeah, it didn't end the way we wanted it to, and yeah, okay, I don't know if it was McDermott or, that made the calls where they played the wrong kind of defense and they did the wrong kind of kickoff, who knows, okay, but whatever, it's like, it broke all of our hearts. Okay, so here's this whole, 5,000 people in an audience at a game in Mudville, and Casey, the big hero, strikes out. Okay, to put it to football, maybe it's like your star receiver is running down the field, they throw him a long pass that where he'd score the winning touchdown, and he drops the ball. Same kind of thing, okay? But it's a human emotion, He doesn't do it on purpose, just like Casey doesn't strike out on purpose. So we're seeing all of that human emotion go on there. And that's the fun of a narrative poem, is that we hear a story and maybe we can relate to it. It's pretty cool, okay? And now there's another poem I want to share with you, but I really do have to kind of change the setting for us a little bit. So we're going to move around to the other side of the room here because it's just a totally different kind of poem. And so, I need to set up a little bit differently in the other end of the room so that you can get away from the Casey kind of psychology because we're doing something else here, okay? And we're going from spring to the dead of winter, okay? And it's important to know that, we're into really cold times now because in 1898 in the Yukon, there was a great gold rush, but we're talking about in the Yukon, okay? And, temperatures can be 75 below zero. Jack London's story, To Build a Fire, talks about where it gets down to 75 below zero in the Yukon Territory. And that's exactly what we're talking about, okay? So, in fact, this is a real thing. By the way, this hat says Trocaire College on it, so it's like, okay, you got to do the right things. So, okay, so, I got to get dressed for the cold, so I got to have a hat and a shirt. And yeah, it might be 65 degrees outside today, but that's okay, we're having fun. Okay, so, and you're saying, oh, tell the guy to shut up, will you? Okay, so, this is a poem that was written about the way these guys tried to survive during the gold rush, okay? And life was difficult because we're talking about 1898, so a century and a quarter ago. And so we're talking about, okay, even gloves like this, which aren't terribly heavy, but they're a whole lot better than people would have had then. And a jacket like this is a whole lot better than people would have had then, that kind of thing, okay? So, it's like Um, it's a different world. And this is a story. This is a narrative poem. The name of it is The Cremation of Sam McGee. It's a narrative poem that tells a little bit about that era. Okay, and it goes like this. Again, the name of the poem is The Cremation of Sam McGee. So, there are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home down the south to roam around the poles, God only knows. It was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close and our lashes froze, till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were twinkling heel and toe, he turned to me and, Cap, says he, I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you won't refuse my last request. Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He sat in his sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. But before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in this land of death as I hurried horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise I'd given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, you may tax your brain and brawn, but you promised true. Now it's up to you to cremate these last remains. Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed. Well, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were numb and my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone fire not light, where the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the nameless foes. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day the quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. And on we went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and I'd hearken with a grin. Till we came to the marge of Lake LaBarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, and I saw in a trice it was called the Alice May. We're talking about he found his ship, frozen in the ice. I looked at it, and I thought of it, and I looked at my frozen chum. Now here, said I, with my fateful eye, is a crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The furnace roared, and the flame just soared, such a blaze you seldom see. Then I burrowed a hole in the glowing coals, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so, and the heavens howled, and the huskies growled, and the winds began to blow. It was cold as ice, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And an inky smoke and a greasy cloak went streaking down the sky. I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out and they danced about ere again I ventured near. Ere again I ventured near. I'm sorry. Anyway, I thought it was time I looked. And I went to see Sam McGee. And I opened the door, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm. He said, please close that door. It's warm in here, but it's cold out there. And I don't want you to let the cold in, because since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. I'm sorry, I blew a few lines there, but you get the idea. Sam is inside inside the furnace where he's been cremated, but he says, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge I cremated Sam McGee. So, I guess camera shy, I don't know. But I blew a few lines in the middle, but you get the idea that he took Sam's body and put it in the furnace in a boat that was jammed in the ice, and you know, because Sam wanted to be cremated, he didn't want to be buried in the land of ice, and so when he went back in, Sam was sitting there, warm, okay, hot, and you know, obviously cremated. So you know, but anyway, so it's a poem that tells a story, and it's a poem that's kind of fun, and yet, you know, it's a poem that brings home to us what that life was all about in the Yukon Territory. And I mean, a lot of people died, a lot of people froze to death. You know, and a lot of people didn't find gold, of course, when they rushed to the Yukon Territory to find gold. It did really help populate Alaska. You know, there is a positive to it. And some people found gold, and some people got, in fact, incredibly wealthy. But this is a poem where you know, they were talking about what it was really like for these guys, because it was just a terribly difficult way of life. And the poem, The Cremation of Sam McGee, was written by Robert Service. Okay, so anyway, so, you know, those are a couple of narrative poems that tell stories. You know, I'm not going to recite another one, but I'll tell you another one that all of you know. The Night Before Christmas is a narrative poem, okay? I mean, isn't that cool? What a cool narrative poem that, you know, all of you know, okay? And I could recite it for you, but we've already gone 26 minutes, so it's too long. But anyway, so we're on to narrative poetry, and there'll be a list of poems, and I'm looking for you to talk about them a little bit. You get the assignment, okay? But hopefully you get an idea now of what narrative poetry is all about, and why poetry came to be, and why poetry can be such a neat thing for all of us to experience, okay? So you know where to get me if you have questions. Have a good week.